Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, August the 21st, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for this beautiful Tuesday. We hope your Tuesday's off to a great start. It's off to a good start here after all this really, really hot weather. We've got cool temperatures. We're in the 60s this morning, Cindy. Can you believe this?
What?
In the middle of August, we're in the 60s. I mean, it's going to get into the 70s today, but it's like, this is a good day. This is a really good day.
I'm a little jealous, I think, about that. I'm sure it'll be in the 90s again here today. At least, well, lately it's been in the high 80s, but then, it says heat indexes feels like 98 or 101, I think this weekend it was. So when I read that, it's like the way the mind works, right? It's like I read 90 and I go, oh my goodness, it's so hot. And then I scroll down on my app and it says feels like 101. I instantly feel hotter. It's hotter than that. Oh.
It's amazing how perception works. I mean, it really is, because it's all perception, especially a heat index. A heat index is totally perception. 100%. There's no heat index thermometer you can ever look at. It doesn't exist anywhere.
So since I'm inside most of the day today, I will just have the air conditioner on, and as I look out the window, I'll just imagine your 65-degree day over there. And
yeah. I mean, I woke up this morning, it was 61 degrees at 6 a.m. It's like, whoa, unbelievable in August. Wow.
I think if I were to walk outside right now and it was 61 degrees, I would feel like I needed a sweater.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, because for us, that's like a 30-degree drop,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's wonderful.
Yep.
That's wonderful.
Yep. Of course, you guys get the nice temperate temperatures during the winter, so there is a trade-off there. But nevertheless, we've got the good ones here, so I'll take them.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm willing to just enjoy other people's beautiful pictures of snow.
Yeah, the thing about snow is it's cold.
Right? Exactly. I know, though, that people that have grown up with four seasons often really miss it when they move somewhere where they don't have, like, we really don't have four seasons here. We have two.
Right. Yeah.
Most of it's summer.
Well, it's funny because we had 4 seasons when we lived in Virginia. You get 4 full seasons there. But I actually missed New England fall. I mean, it was a true fall that you had in Virginia, but New England fall is so much better because of the colors. We have a wider range of trees that produce brilliantly colored leaves. And so, I mean, when you watch you go out, leaf peeping as they call it, looking at the colors of the trees in Virginia, it's bland by comparison. I mean, I used to say that to people who live in Virginia. They'd look at me cross-eyed, and when they did, I'd say to them, "You've never been to New England during leaf peeping season, have you?" And they said, "Well, no, not really." Let me tell you, it's gorgeous. It is probably the best in the country. I mean, you drive up on like the Interstate 90 turnpike through Massachusetts in the peak part of the color, and it's like driving into a slideshow. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Yellows, reds, and greens, of course, and purples, and like a wide range of swath of colors. It's like looking at an artist's palette or something.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When I grew up in California, and we don't have a true, that kind of fall. Well, no one does, but New England. I mean, that's why New England's so famous for the leaves. People go there during autumn just to see the leaves. I've been to New England twice, once in the winter and once in the summer.
Oh, you missed it.
I know. But when I was, I was an adult, but a young adult, I remember that I bought a calendar because of the photography, the pictures on it, a wall calendar, and they were pictures of leaves. And I thought, at the time, we look at things now and we're like, oh, that's Photoshop. But there wasn't even a term of Photoshop then. I mean, but I thought it was, edited somehow. And then reading all the descriptions, it was not. And it wasn't the red leaves that were blowing my mind. It was the blue ones and the purple ones.
Yeah,
and
purple.
I mean, there were colors. I couldn't believe it. I was like, these are leaves in nature.
Right.
It was gorgeous. And I always remember that. I felt like, okay, that's different. In California and even here, we get a few orangey red trees, a few, just a dusting of them, but nothing that's that spectacular. So that is really, really something to be thankful that you get to see every year in person,
Oh,
right?
it's really it's something. About let's see, when was it? It must have been 2 years ago, I guess it was. My high school class had a reunion, and I almost didn't go. I never go to those things, but a friend of mine from high school, uh, a guy I had played music with, he and I had reconnected the year before. We found out we were living an hour apart in Virginia, and like, oh well, hey Gary, how you doing? After many years of not seeing him. But he convinced me to go, and I went. And that weekend that I went was the peak season, so I got to drive the entire length. Not that this is really long, but I drove nearly the entire length of I-90 through Massachusetts, just enjoying this color show all the way. It was beautiful. It was fabulous. What a great way to go to a reunion, you know?
Seriously. I mean, how long does it last?
It varies. I mean, there are a lot of factors that go into how brilliant the colors are too. Some years they're not as good. Other years they're better. I don't know all the factors, but I know temperature, change in temperature, water. All these are factors, and there have been years where the color thing was over after a few days. There are others
Oh,
when they've
wow.
lasted a few weeks, and it
Okay.
could be anywhere in between in terms of what the peak color is. I remember one
Yeah.
year, this was before Louise and I moved to Virginia. I think it was actually before I met her. There was one year where there's a corridor that goes up through Connecticut, kind of toward the center, actually a little bit left of center in Connecticut, up to Massachusetts. It's called the Route 8 corridor. And that particular year, I'm going to guess it was like, oh, something like 1993, 4, 5, something like that. Oh my goodness! I mean, it gets some decent color usually, but that one year it was a blaze. It was like the hills were on fire. That's how
Hmm.
brilliant the color was, and it went on for days. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but I think it was in brilliant blazing color for like 3 weeks. Man, you just took drives north just to drive through the color. That's all you cared about.
Well, that's why I asked, like, how long does it last? Because I was thinking, well, what about when someone that's not from there and they decide they're going to make that trip
Mm.
for that specific reason? You know, they
And there are
certainly would want to
people
be sure.
that it actually
Yeah,
is a tourist industry to go see the color. It's amazing.
right. Yeah, I've seen the ads for the tours.
Hmm.
So it's like I guess they follow everything. The ones that are professionals at setting it all up, make sure that you get
Oh
what
yes.
you came for. So
Well, you know who are among the biggest promoters of it are the ski resorts, because the ski resorts want you to kind of get in the habit of coming up there for the ski season, so they get you started with the color during the fall.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yep. So anyway, we've been we don't have our usual topic anymore. I mean, we finished Money of the Law of Attraction last week after what was it, like 4 or 5 months we were working on that book.
We did. We took our time meandering through it, but it was great. There was so
Oh, it
much
was
there.
fun. It was really in-depth stuff. But after it was done, you made a comment. I can't remember if you made it on the show or off the show, but you made a comment about billionaires. I think it was. What do you remember what you said? I don't remember what you said, but it was something like we have the wrong perceptions very often about billionaires. And we thought, well, why not do a topic on billionaires? Because people want to attract money. I mean, that's certainly one of the top three things people want to attract. That's why we did the book,
Right.
in terms of going through the show. So why not look at what it's like when you're actually a billionaire? Who are the billionaires? What do they do with their money? How do they live their lives?
Right. No, well, it came up when we were talking about we were recording a promo
Hmm. Oh, right. That's
and
right. Yes.
and we were talking about our perception of money. Like we have perceptions about all different types of things, right? Or of people. So if you were to be telling me about a person in your life and you said, "Oh, they really love sports," that may give me an idea of them, or they're really hysterically funny. They could do stand up comedy. They are so funny.
Right.
Or what? And I said, what would I think? What would you think if someone said they love money? would you, and they said it, they didn't say, oh, they really love money, or they said, oh, they love money. If they just said it in a neutral way, what would the perception be on the
And,
hearer?
well, yeah, and it depends a lot on who the person listening is, because
Well,
that's really what's going to drive it.
And so that's, that was what was coming up in my mind. Just a lot of ideas about our perception of, and I'm always like making air quotes over here, our perception of rich people.
Right.
That means something different to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But, whatever it is to you to imagine what you would consider maybe extreme wealth, what is your perception of someone that has it? And do we have an us and them kind of mentality?
And I think we do. I mean, the people who are most famously wealthy are typically the ones who get the bad press. And often for very good reason. It's not like all wealthy people are saints. There are quite a few who aren't. I mean...
Well, what's interesting is that it's kind of like when you hear in the news, like when the whole Me Too thing happened and really blew up.
Right.
And there were people that were named that were in certain industries. But like, as someone who follows Buddhism, there were some Buddhist monks that were named. Anytime we hold someone up as, that they should never make a mistake, and then we hear that they made a big one, right? Or that they don't have the morals we thought they had, or they fell short or of behaving in a way that's acceptable. It's like, oh, my goodness. But it doesn't make all people that teach any kind of religion or spirituality bad, in the same way that all billionaires aren't bad, or all anything. That's what they teach you, right? Is whenever you take a test, if it's true and false test, and the statement is all something, it's usually false.
Right.
So I just started thinking about that, like you said, they get bad press.
Oh, yeah.
And that doesn't mean that we have to believe that anyone with money is all lumped into the same category, which is a bad person or they do bad things. Because if we have that mindset, we will hold ourselves away from wealth.
True.
Which makes total sense. I mean, if I think that having people with money are bad people, why would I want money?
Yeah, right? Because you're basically saying, I want to be a bad person.
Yeah. And so it's often, of course, a subconscious thing that we're doing, because we have to remember that most of our decisions, all of our decisions are made on emotions. And then we use logic later to make sense of them.
That's a good point.
And most of them are made, by the larger part of our brain, which is the subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
The larger part of our brain, the reptilian part of our brain, the mammalian part of our brain, the oldest, most ancient part of our brain is huge. I think it's 85% or more of our actual brain.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part of our brain calls a lot of the shots. And we get these ideas because we don't, I think anyway, because we don't put in a little time and effort to do the research to find out other ideas. Right?
And interestingly, on a topic like this, it's actually pretty easy to do the research too.
I know. I was kind of shocked.
I mean, you can go to Wikipedia, you can get lists of all the billionaires, for instance.
Right.
Which is pretty cool. But in fact, there's one billionaire, I don't even know who he is, but he's got a great name. His name is Bob Rich. And when I find out more about him, he's a cartoonist.
Wow.
He's a billionaire cartoonist. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
I think that it does us a lot of good. I'll back up and tell this quick story. It's not really about money per se, but just about perception. Mm-hmm. One of my first clients wanted to do a particular thing, but did not have a college degree and really was doubting their ability to do this particular thing in business, and just kept saying, well, but I didn't finish college.
Uh-huh.
And I have never felt like not going to college should stop anybody from doing anything. And if it is something that's stopping them, then they can go to college and finish their degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so many times people let certain things be an excuse without even knowing it, because for them it feels very important and very valid, right? Like, not just like they're making up an excuse, but I mean, it's really something standing in their way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave my client an assignment, and the assignment was sort of like what we're doing with researching philanthropy and billionaires. My assignment to this person was just go find some people that have been really successful in that field, and find until you can come back and tell me 3 of them that I would recognize their name, like big name, successful people in this field that never went to college.
Yeah, oh, there are.
That's your
It's a long
that's
list,
your
actually.
homework.
Yeah.
That's your homework. Go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in any field, right?
Right.
And they came back, and they were like a changed person. They were bubbly and excited, and oh my goodness, I had no idea that this one, this one, and this one. And they named off these people that, were known to them, if not to me, but I think I did recognize the names. And they were so excited that they didn't even finish high school, or they didn't go to college or whatever. And it was just a little bit of research,
Mm-hmm.
and it brought hope back to this person.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they actually did, within maybe 18 months of that time, they were successful in that field.
No kidding. Wow, that's a terrific turnaround.
They manifested an opportunity that seemed like a miracle, and it just, they had a maybe 5-year career in that field where they were very successful, and then they moved on to something else. And I love that story, because it really, it all seemed like magic, and a lot of it really kind of was, but it all started with something that was very practical, and that was just go do the research and find out that this is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Like you just said, Bob Rich, is that the name you said?
That's his name, yeah. Right.
A comic, a cartoon artist or an animator or whatever, and you think, wow.
And I was looking at, he has 2 cartoon strips. You never heard of either one of them. Where he made his money was on editorial cartoons.
Ah.
I mean, who would have thought you could become a billionaire doing editorial cartoons? But you can.
Well, it goes to show you that, I mean, just knowing that the possibility is there.
Yeah.
And maybe not everyone wants to be a billionaire, but for money to come in, I mean, that's this whole discussion started with us in the conversations that we had over time reading Money and the Law of Attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's the one really super important idea that we have to tackle first, and that is, how do we relate to money? I mean, if we relate to money as something that's bad or evil, or responsible for the world's ills, or causes problems, then we won't be open to receiving it. And if we do receive it, we'll get rid of it as fast as we can. Like, it comes in, and then we create some kind of problem where it goes back out. I mean, money should come in and go out.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That money is like any other energy. It should flow in and flow out. And I like to think of spending money that way. Even when something happens and it causes us to be in a position where we have to spend money that we weren't expecting that we would have to spend, that maybe we don't want to spend, like we have a tire blowout or something, or,
right.
Some problem with the plumbing, or I don't know, some house thing that has to be fixed, or some immediate emergency. I always look at that as, I always remember that money is going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
and that the mechanic has to pay his family. I mean, has to buy groceries for his family too.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
And
Exactly.
the doctor has to feed her children too. I mean, like all these people where money goes where we think we don't really want to put it. It's just putting money back into circulation, so it can come back around to us again.
And that's the way it works. It's true. It's also true. I think that there are one of the main reasons that there are downs on people with money is the most famous ones are controversial. Probably the most famous one right now today is the president, Donald Trump. And there's a minority, a sizable minority of people who are fans of Donald Trump, and they think that he's great. And there's another very sizable minority, maybe even a majority, who are down on Donald Trump and just can't stand the man. And so because he's a billionaire, well, he becomes like the representative of billionaires. Or in the political sphere, whenever you look at, whenever you think about people who are donors, or major players in the political sphere. On the left, it's going to be like George Soros, and on the right, it's going to be like the Koch brothers or Warren Buffett or somebody like that. And so they get a certain charge attached to them, depending on which side of the divide you're on. Oh, that person's terrible. He's just this rich guy who's just trying to dominate the world and all that kind of thing. So that's where we get our perceptions from. But we forget that there are other people we really like who are also billionaires, like George Lucas, the guy who created the Star Wars series and the Indiana Jones series.
Well, like you said, they get most of the press, period.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really, because those are the names that people think of when you bring up the word billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they're on extreme sides, or at least their press is, because
exactly.
Right? Because the people that are supporting one side are against the other side. And, that's an interesting concept in itself, is that in the levels of energy, the most predominant energy levels in the world are those lower levels that have to do with conflict and competition. And in that level of energy, the way things are perceived is that for one person to win, the other one has to lose. And there's no concept in those lower levels of energy of a win-win.
Right.
Which is a much higher level of energy. And it has to do with, it's even higher than cooperation. It's collaboration. It's, we can create a situation between us. We can create something that feels like a win for both of us. We're both winning. Sometimes I like to say that the best relationships are the ones where each person thinks they're getting the better end of the deal.
Right.
Right. And when we think about the push and pull, the two sides of the winners and the losers kind of thing. And when that's all we ever see of people with money, but you're right. It's the people that don't get the press, or don't get the press about what they do with their wealth. That list of, we were looking at separate lists for just a moment. You might have been looking for much longer than I did. I just took a peek at the most famous or the biggest philanthropists. So it may not be billionaires, but I was looking at people that give the greatest amount of money away.
Sure. Yeah.
And, I was thinking, oh, that's right. Like, I knew some of these things, like Bono and Lady Gaga and music people. I knew them, but I wasn't thinking of them when I heard the word philanthropist or billionaires.
True. Yeah.
Like, a lot of people would, because they know their stories better. But I thought, okay. And there were so many names on the list I never heard of before.
Oh, yeah.
Which is great news.
Well, I'm going to give you a name of somebody who's really very, very wealthy. And you'll be surprised to know that you really know who he is. But when I say the name, you're not going to have a clue. His name is Pierre Morad Amidjar.
Nope.
Better
not ringing a bell.
Better known as the founder of eBay.
Ah, okay.
Became a billionaire at age 31 when eBay went public.
Mm-hmm.
And very, very wealthy. I mean, this guy's wealth is between $4 and $10 billion. So this is like serious money. But you've never heard of him.
Well, when I was looking at the list, it was funny. I was seeing names I recognized, like the ones that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seeing, names I recognized from entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at that person's on the list and this person. And then I saw this name, and it was Catherine T. MacArthur
Mm.
of the MacArthur Foundation. And I thought, oh my goodness, because John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur, I've heard that sentence of the MacArthur Foundation. I've heard it so many times because a great deal of money was given or is continually given to NPR, and I listen
Right.
to NPR.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to see who are these people, and I was reading about them. She was the daughter of Irish immigrants on Chicago's South Side, 9 children. And she married him, and he purchased Bankers Life and Casualty for $2,500 and then used mass marketing techniques to sell insurance by mail.
Oh.
And in the 60s, he was one of the top, I think, 3 wealthy people in the United States, maybe the 3rd wealthiest.
Wow.
But the story said that they bought a hotel in Palm Beach Shores on Singer Island, Florida, and that they were known for their frugality even when they were at their wealthiest, and they lived in a modest apartment overlooking the parking lot of the hotel, and that he conducted most of his business from a back booth in the hotel's coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that. I thought that's interesting to discuss because they lived very, very frugally. And why is that? I mean, I don't know why. We would have to ask them, and I don't
Right.
believe either. I don't think either one of them are alive any longer. But see, their legacy lives on because
Yeah.
I still hear, the sponsorship of NPR radio
Right.
shows when I
Sure.
listen, and they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that my life has been made so much better because I've listened to NPR since I was a kid, and I always find it to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it affects my life. Their giving affected my life, and our lives are all affected by people's philanthropy, whether we recognize it or not.
There's also something that a lot of people don't know about that was started by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett called the Giving Pledge. Have you heard of that one?
I believe I've heard a little bit about it, but tell me more.
Okay, well, I'm going to read from the Wikipedia article because that way I can be authoritative. But the Giving Pledge is a campaign to encourage wealthy people to contribute a majority of their wealth to philanthropic causes. As of 2018, the pledge has 183 signatories, either individuals or couples from 22 different countries. Most of the signatories of the pledge are billionaires, and their pledges total over $365 billion. It does not actually dictate that the money will be spent in any certain way or towards any particular charity or cause. So there's no obligation, and there's no forced obligation to actually donate the money. So it's purely on a pledge basis. But I mean, these are all people who have signed up for it, and a lot of the names you'll know. Obviously, Bill and Melinda Gates, Warren Buffett. Larry Ellison may not be famous to a lot of people, but he's a famous software designer. Michael Bloomberg, the ex-mayor of New York. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Carl Icahn, real estate investor. I mean, there's a whole lot of them. Paul Allen, who was involved with Google. Let's see. Elon Musk. Everybody's been hearing about Elon Musk a lot. Who else is famous on here? Let's see. Well, some names that people know. Oh, George Lucas is on here. I mentioned him earlier. I think Spielberg is on here too. Believe it or not, David Rockefeller. That's not a name you'd expect to hear on a list like that. But David Rockefeller has pledged to give away a majority of his wealth. That's pretty cool.
I think it is cool. I think because once your needs and probably some of your desires, are met, right? For physical well-being, for relationship, for health, for sustenance, and for the basic human needs that we all have, once those needs are met, the next thing that people are likely to focus on is legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
true.
that's what I see here, is that, they have an intention to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And to leave some kind of legacy in the process of doing that. I think it's amazing. And I think I'm curious. This is a day we haven't even talked about it. We've been right in here and we're halfway through the show. We haven't talked about calling in.
Well, yeah, if there are any billionaires listening in, we'd love to have them call.
No.
Oh, that's not what you meant?
That's great too. No, that's not what I meant. But what I would love to hear is, I would love to hear how people hear this conversation. In other words, what comes up in our minds when we listen in on a conversation about billionaires
Mm-hmm.
and about people that have made pledges to give away most of their money? What's the automatic story that pops into our head? Do we think we don't believe them? Do we think, oh yeah, well, but they have so much money they could never spend it? So, in other words, is there like sort of a bent one way or the other that we start having thoughts about? Because it's going to be related to what our money story is.
This is true, and that's really the main indicator. But well, hey, it'd be great to find out if anybody wanted to call in who might be listening live. Obviously, if you're listening to it in the recorded podcast format, that's not so easy to do. But if you are listening live, and we do encourage people to do that, first of all, for those who want to know how to do it, you just go to the homepage of the website, because you can listen to the live broadcast through the player that appears at the top of the page on the homepage of the website. But if you are listening live, call in. I mean, if you're in the United States, the phone number to call is area code 646-876-9923. And yes, we'll repeat the number, so we'll run for your pencil and paper. There's also an access code. The access code is 860-264-5432. And then you hit the pound sign. That gets you in so that you can be talking to us. But yeah, we'd love to have people call in and share their perception and their perspective on this, because, hey, if we're going to attract money into our lives, like you said, we've got to have a good relationship with money, and how we feel about the billionaire population, or even the millionaire population. Do you know there are millions of millionaires? People don't really realize that, but there are millions of them. I mean, finding a concise list is impossible, because no list would be concise. It'd have to be long.
Exactly. No, I mean, I think this might be really sort of the number one indicator of how open you are to receiving money into your life, is how you feel about people with money.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's very important. And so, yeah, so if you're listening to the podcast at the recording at a later time, then you can call us tomorrow.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Or at the earliest live broadcast that you can find that works for you. You can give us a call and tell us, how you, what came up for you when you heard this discussion. I guess that's what I would like to ask people is when you heard this idea and this discussion, and what came up for you? Because right now, I think a really good way to explain this is that right now our country is really charged politically, right?
Oh yeah.
And we've talked about there are people that are on one side or the other. And think about how we sometimes look at the people that aren't on the side we're on. Mm-hmm. The other people.
Them people.
Those people over there, right?
Right, over there, yes.
Right? And so if you found out that tonight it was mandatory that you had to go to a party, or that a group of people were coming to your house and they were those people from people over there. How would you feel, right? There'd be a certain feel. I know how I'd feel. I mean, I'll say it. I would be dreading. Oh, okay. Of course, but a lot of people are like, yeah, well, that's how we're going to feel in November when we have to go to Thanksgiving. And there's all these members of our family that are there that don't have the same views as we do.
Oh, yes. The family political divide. That's always a fun one.
Well, I mean, I know no one likes to really talk about it, but the truth is that I remember right after the election, Oh my goodness. And even the next Thanksgiving, a year later, I remember even on social media, how many people were saying, we're not going this year. Not going. We're
Wow.
not going to do it. We're not going to go home for the holidays. We can't do it. And so I'm making this analogy because just to kind of flesh out the point of that, the way that energy can be when we've got something that we want to hold away from us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't agree with these views. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't, and we can get the same way about money without even realizing it. It's like, I remember hearing someone tell a story when they were working in a corporate job, and someone had mentioned to them that they were putting them in for a promotion to this other department. And it was a lot more money, like a lot more money. And they were talking about how they started having these thoughts. Ooh, those people make a lot more money in that department. And she said she started thinking things like, ooh, I bet they don't wear jeans when they go out for a beer. I bet they all wear khakis.
Uh-huh, yes.
And then she thought, ooh, I bet they don't even go out for a beer. They probably go out for a cocktail. Like, like all these things. And basically it was this long running commentary of like us and them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to fit in with this group.
Right.
And so that's what we're talking about, is like, how do we get more comfortable?
Well, there's an interesting thing that happened with the series that came out of the UK, the TV series Downton Abbey, that played for, I guess, 6 seasons.
Oh, I love that show.
And the one of the interesting words that came out of that had kind of died out, but now is very much more in vogue, is the word snobbery. Because it kept coming up as a theme in the show. And one of my favorite scenes in the show was at one point where Maggie Smith's character, she's the Dowager Countess, she is talking with her butler, and she says to her butler, "Oh, don't be such a snob." Now, and she is like the ultimate snob, and she's telling her butler not to be a snob.
She was in every one of my favorite scenes.
She was in a lot of people's favorite scenes.
I was always watching that show. I was always like, the writers gave Maggie Smith all of the best lines. I mean,
yeah. Well, she delivers them so well. That's why he kept giving them the good lines.
Does.
Oh, jeez. My favorite line of hers was, "What is a weekend?" When you're so wealthy and you're so uppity crust that you don't have a clue what the word weekend means in the context of the everyday person's life. What's a weekend?
Well, see, now these are the kind of examples. Like, if we feel like rich people are all a bunch of snobs, and some of them are, right?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Just
snobbery
like
is rampant.
There's some people who aren't rich who are snobbish.
Usually worse. They're usually called nouveau riche.
So, that's the thing, is that we're making an effort to recognize that good people are everywhere, and that many of them are wealthy, and that the majority of wealthy people are good people.
Mm-hmm.
I would go out on a limb and say that.
Oh, I think so.
I do not. I mean, I always bring it back to what you know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, what do I know for sure? Well, I have to go on my own experience. So of my own experience, the people that I personally know, I don't know if I personally know any billionaires, but I personally know some millionaires,
mm-hmm.
And people that have vast amounts of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very generous people who care about the world.
Most of them are, yeah.
Yeah. That's my experience.
I think it's a very valid depiction. I think the average wealthy person gets a bad rap because of the few famous ones, like you said, who get the bad press. But the vast majority, they're very good people, and they're very generous people. They're caring. I mean, they're in many ways representative of the population at large. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. Now, a few minutes ago, we promised that we would give the number again. So hopefully, those of you who have gone off to get your pad and your paper, you've had time to get it. So here it is. Be ready to write. Within the United States, the number to call is area code 646 876-9923. That's 876-9923. And then the access code to get into the room where we do the podcast is 860-264-5432. And then you hit the pound sign. So that'll get you in. So if anyone's listening live and you want to share your thoughts about this, we would love to hear from you.
We would love it. We would love it. I love this discussion. And partly because it's brought up a lot of thoughts in my own mind where I catch myself having certain, stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, no, that's not true. And I don't even believe that's true.
Right.
Consciously, logically, right. But we hear those stories so much. We talked about before the idea that in the movies, often it's the villain is the, wealthy evil person that lives up on the hill in the mansion, and the hero of the movie is the poor struggling person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the good guy is always poor. And the rich guy is always the evil one. And it's like, that's just not true. But
Mm-hmm.
we do get those stories are told so often, they become, a cultural meme. And then they're like a memory we all have, which is what that term actually meant before it meant a picture with words on it.
Yes, right.
We had memes. We had memes before we
They
had
did
the internet.
exist. They did exist. How about
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
And they affect us, kind of on a collective level. Those stories that we hear over and over. There's an HBO show right now that just ended its first season called Succession. Oh my goodness! Like I said in the second episode, or maybe the first, is it's about a wealthy family and the power struggle within the family over the money and the corporations they own and et cetera. And it really is like all of these really terrible stereotypes.
Yep.
Every single one. Like I remember seeing on Twitter people saying about this show that they couldn't make it through the fourth episode. They were like, I'm done. I can't watch it anymore. There's not one redeeming quality of one single person in this entire show. And I said, this is exactly what gives rich people such a bad name.
Yeah.
It's this show. It's
Sure.
like these stereotypes that are just out there. And so I decided when we were doing the Money and the Law of Attraction that I was going to stop that us and them kind of thought as much as possible. And I would decide that shows like this give us a bad name.
It's a good practice, I have to say, to try to root that out. And I don't think it actually takes all that much effort to root it out. About the only way it might take effort is if you have it, you've got it tied into some sort of deep-seated pain from your childhood, and you've inextricably tied them all together. Then it might be a hard time to root it out. But most of the time, for most people, I don't think it's all that difficult. I think it's just a question of deciding to do it more than anything else.
Well, I remember reading somewhere, and I don't remember where. This is one of the pitfalls of being someone who reads so many books, is that sometimes I just can't remember where I read a thing. But
Right.
It was a story of someone telling a story about when they were a child. And now you were talking about, deep-seated, horror things that happen. But this wasn't that. It was just the idea that every day, I think it was their grandfather would give them a ride to school.
Mm-hmm.
And they drove through a very wealthy neighborhood. And they heard over and over their grandfather say, oh, who would look at that big expensive car? Who would spend so much money on a car like that? That's ridiculous to waste your money like that. And who would ever live in a big house like that? Can you imagine having to keep that thing clean? The mortgage must be just atrocious, and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they heard growing up every day on the way to school. And it wasn't even like rich people are bad.
No,
it was
more like this is my way of feeling better about the fact that I don't have their money.
Exactly. But it was, oh, nobody wants that. And maybe feeling bad that the kid was growing up, without certain things. I don't know. But the story was, who would want that? And it would be ridiculous for you to want that. right? And there's that little slight, understanding of I shouldn't want this because it would be silly or ridiculous. It's not even bad or evil, right? It's just it's wrong on some level for me to want these things. And
Yeah,
so
that's a fairly common thing, I think. It's not something that I normally think about. I have other ways of blocking money, but I don't need that one.
well, when we're little, most of our kind of, I hate to always sound like I'm trying to make an analogy with human brains and computers, but there are some things that line up there
Oh,
with
there are.
with that analogy. And most of our programming is set before we're 7 years old.
True.
Until we become, and how we change that is that we become conscious of it. That's the first step.
Mm-hmm.
We recognize, like this person that said, oh my goodness, I recognize that every day on the way to school, I heard my grandfather say, it's ridiculous to want a big house. No one should spend that much on a car. And so I thought, okay, so that programming goes, all right, that, we shouldn't do that.
Basically, you shut yourself out of any possibility.
And then when we become conscious of it and we recognize, oh, like that was just a story and everyone's doing the best they can. And I always tell clients this, I tell myself this, my friends this, our parents, all of our parents were doing the best they could.
That's true.
We need to just recognize we're adults now and
not always easy to do, but yeah, it's important to do. It's certainly important to do because until we do it, we really can't let go of that particular block that we put up. Because we put up, this is the thing that I've realized. We put up a lot of blocks against money. It's not like one.
Right.
The average person doesn't have one block because we do know that the universe, through the law of attraction, can deliver amazing stuff to amazing people, and it always does it through the path of least resistance. And just like the analogy of water running through the rocks, if you got a gap somewhere, the water is going to get through, and so it's going to be able to deliver to you. But you get enough blocks up there, you've created a beaver dam, and the water is not going to get through.
Right. Great analogy. And we do it all the time.
Yeah.
And so all of those cultural memes and stereotypes that we have about rich people, whenever you hear me say rich people, just imagine I'm making those air quotes because to someone else, we're all rich.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right?
That's true.
And those of us who are listening to podcasts, let me just put it that way, most of us anyway, we live better than, most of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not opposed to riches in that sense.
Right.
So we're all moving forward on some level. And when we can recognize that we can put ourselves in, we're all just humanity. We're all just people.
Mm-hmm. That's
and
right.
We don't have to always make divisions between us and them. Harder, maybe easier said than done, especially in today's, climate. But I think that's the main thing that I've determined to stop doing.
Mm.
That's why I jokingly said to you, these certain people that will remain nameless that have such a bad rap about money,
mm-hmm.
when they do things that get, into the public sphere of knowledge and we all groan about it, we say that's what gives, like I said about the HBO show, that's what gives rich people a bad name. I decided to say that's what gives us a bad name. I'm just going to put myself in there.
Yeah.
Right off the bat.
Yeah,
and recognize that, we're no different. We're just all people.
We do it so easily. We do the grouping so easily. One of my favorite joke ways of showing just how easy it is to group people is to say there are two kinds of people in the world. And those two kinds of people are those who decide that there are two kinds of people in the world and those who do not.
There are two kinds of people in the world, me and everyone else.
Me and everyone else, right?
Right.
That's probably the more accurate one for most people, isn't it?
So I think I've enjoyed hearing about the little bit that we've talked about today, specific people. And that's what I want to delve into a little bit more is learning about these people.
Oh, yeah.
These philanthropists, these billionaires who have an intention to do something wonderful in the world and to leave a legacy of goodness
Mm-hmm.
and good works, right?
And
I
there
think
are
it's
a lot of
important
them.
to recognize how our lives are affected. When my kids were in high school, um, they were taken on a trip to Washington, D.C., and it was funded by a family that did it every year. They were granted scholarships at certain times, my boys. Like I mentioned, NPR.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you start recognizing the way philanthropy has impacted your own life, that may be a clue as well.
Yeah, I don't think people necessarily realize just how much philanthropy there is. I mean, there is a ton of it in virtually every field that you can possibly imagine. There is just money that is given away, supporting a whole wide range of interests that the donors have. You mentioned NPR and also public television. Both have gotten extensive contributions. I mean, you were mentioning MacArthur, the MacArthur couple. There's another
Right, the
one.
MacArthur Foundation.
Yeah, there was another one that was one of the founders of Downton Abbey, and oh geez, what's the name? The Shileys, Darlene and Donald Shiley. Well, Donald Shiley, I said he was a chemical engineer. He wasn't. He was actually an inventor of a heart valve. He
Oh, wow.
invented one of the first heart valves that were used to basically save the lives of people whose hearts were failing them. Like, wow, that's magnificent. I mean, let alone any philanthropy that he did. That alone was a tremendous gift to mankind.
And now, how was he and his philanthropy? How was that connected to Downton Abbey?
He was or actually his wife, because he's passed. He passed in the 1990s, I believe. Oh no, I'm sorry, he passed around 2010. But he was, or his wife was one of or actually the largest donor to the Downton Abbey program. So, and in fact, toward the end of the series, I believe they actually had a little cameo of her for like 10 seconds or 15 seconds of Darlene Shiley saying why it was that she wanted to give to public television and why she wanted listeners to give as well. But she.
Oh, wow. So that was partly funded by a philanthropist.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, by three main philanthropists who all gave over $500,000. The Shileys gave $1 million to that program alone.
That's so interesting
Yeah.
because I don't know. I don't think it's something I've ever thought about before. Like, which is funny. I mean, I thought about NPR because I listened to it. I did watch Downton Abbey, and it never would have entered my mind that I was enjoying that program in part due to somebody who was making financial gifts.
And very large ones. Very, very
Yeah.
large ones. Yeah.
So that's really, I mean, there's another example of how someone's giving affected something in my life where I benefited. I had enjoyment.
Yeah, very big enjoyment. I mean, especially if you follow the series from season 1 to season 6.
It was so great. I was so sad when it was over.
Well, there is talk that there's a movie in the works.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, they keep postponing when it's supposed to come out. The latest I heard was it's supposed to come out after the first of next year. But there are a lot of confirmations that a movie is secretly being developed. Gillian Fellows apparently has written part or all of a script. Most of the cast members have already signed on, according to the rumors, and it's coming.
Well, that's wonderful.
So, Downton
Yay.
Abbey fans, you can rejoice.
I am a big Downton Abbey fan. I thought it was a really, really fun show. Great to watch. We enjoyed it for all the seasons. It was great. So I think
I have
that,
to honestly say the first few seasons were just too much of a soap opera for me. I just couldn't stomach it. But when you got to like season 4, by that point, okay, I could handle that. And I watched it with Louise because she was addicted to it.
I loved it, and I loved it for a lot of different reasons. But I thought the writing was really great, and then of course, who doesn't like to just look at that house and the dresses? See, I really liked it for the clothes, but it was a lot of fun. But I think that it's important. I think this work that we're doing here is important for everyone's well-being and relationship with money. Remember that it's a trap to fall into, to think that what about, all these people in the world that don't have enough? What about all the poverty? Who am I to have riches when other people have poverty? Where you can never be poor enough to help people that are in poverty.
And you can never be angry enough to help them either.
Right?
I say that because there's a major scandal going on right now in the Catholic Church. Lots and lots of abuse of children by priests and bishops and even cardinals, perhaps, archbishops. And it's major. It's a huge scandal right now. I saw an article that was written about it. I guess it was written about the Pope's response to it. And I saw some of the comments that people made underneath the article. And one of the comments was that the church has something like $35 billion worth of assets in terms of the Vatican and their art collection and so on and so forth. And the person who wrote the comment very disdainfully commented that, the church has all that money and yet they do nothing to help solve world childhood poverty. And I thought about that for a second. I said, let's see, how many people are there in poverty who are children around the world? I think it's a pretty high number. So I looked it up, and it was 1 billion children. 35 billion in assets. You sell off the Vatican, you sell off the art collection. That's $35 per child. That's not exactly going to solve poverty, right? But the perception is that, the church isn't doing enough because of this horrible scandal that's been going on. In other words, like you were saying before, it's the emotional connection that leads people to the conclusions that not only are the conclusions inaccurate, but where does it leave the person who left that comment? Their whole perception about that money is horribly tainted. Horribly. It's like blood money practically in their mind. And as soon as they start thinking about what are they doing to their own financial prospects?
Right. And that's the thing we have to recognize is that doesn't it make more sense for those of us who wish that wealth was spent differently to acquire wealth of our own so we can spend it the way, the whole be the change that you want to see in the world?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Instead of staying in a place of lack and being angry at all the people that have money because they're not spending it the way we think they should.
Yeah, you
makes more sense to me to just, accrue wealth of my own and then spend it in a way that feels good.
Yeah, you pointed it out very succinctly. It's impossible to help somebody when you're in lack. You can't do it. There's no way to do it.
Yeah.
Not financially anyway, or not in terms of the thing that you lack. Maybe I should make it a little bit broader than financial. But yeah, you can't help somebody from a position of lack. There's no way to do that.
Yeah, you can't give what you don't have.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't have much of an impact trying to give what you don't have. I mean, you can give, here's $1, have fun. And have you given anything? Yeah, you've given something. But unless you have a more positive feeling, a more positive experience when it comes to giving that dollar, it almost doesn't matter what the amount is that you give. What matters is how do you feel about that money? How do you feel about it when you're giving, or how do you feel about it when you're spending, or how do you feel about it when you're earning?
Yeah.
How do you feel about it in any aspect of money?
Yeah, that's the question. If money was a person, what would they be like?
Mm-hmm.
What would that person be like in your life?
Hopefully my best friend.
Right. Exactly.
That's really what we're aiming for here. That's what we're hoping for.
That's what we're aiming for.
Yep.
And we would love to hear from you the next time we're on the air. I really would like to hear, or send us an email or go to loatoday.net and drop us a comment and let us know how you feel about money.
Yeah. And I'll give you a little heads up too. What you say in your comments or if you call or whatever will likely influence future programming.
True.
Right? Because that's what we do. We want to, whenever I'm thinking about what topic I want to come up with, if it's a day to come up with a topic and we aren't working through money and the law of attraction or something like that, that's what I think about. What would the audience want to hear most about? Well, the best way to know that is if they tell me. So that's the way I look at it. When somebody posts a comment, we've talked about stuff too. When people send in comments or whatever, we've actually taken time and talked about it on the show.
Absolutely. So that's the question is, what do you want more of in your life? Since we're talking about the law of attraction, we want to help you attract what you want more of into your life. So what is it? Well, how can we help you get there, right?
You and I have another podcast episode to do coming up during the tomorrow morning, and then tomorrow afternoon. So we got two opportunities that we can talk directly to people and to their comments. So yeah, send those comments in and let's hear what you have to say. And And when we get any, assuming we get one, we'll be happy to talk about it. Cindie, this has been great. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning.
I'll be here tomorrow morning.
I'll be here as well.
I look forward to it as well.
Okay. We'll see you all next time as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.